Senate will come back to order. Secretary will read House Bill 859.
House Bill 859 by Representatives Jaspers the 11th and others, a bill to be entitled an act to amend Part 3 of Article 4 of Chapter 11 of Title 16 of the OCGA relating to carrying and possession of firearms so as to authorize the carrying and possession of certain weapons by weapons carry license holders in or on certain buildings or real property owned by or leased to public institutions of post-secondary education, to provide for related matters, to repeal conflicting laws, and for other purposes. Mr. President, the Committee of the Senate on Judiciary recommends that this bill do pass. Respectfully submitted by Senator McCune of the 29th. Mr. President, that completes the order.
Chair recognizes Senator 23rd present the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, I rise to bring you House Bill 859. House Bill 859 adds a new exception to the 18 exceptions that already allow for concealed carry of firearms in certain areas on the campuses of our public colleges and post-secondary technical schools. The new exception extends the right to licensed carriers who by definition generally must be 21 years or older and must pass an extensive background check. The right does not extend to on-campus student housing or sports venues. Campus carry restrictions have been around since 1993. Within the past decade, though, there's been a movement to protect our Second Amendment right to bear arms by allowing concealed carry by license holders in more public spaces. The most recent development came 3 years ago with Senate Bill 60. Predictions of an increase in violence following the passage of this bill did not come to pass. So we're here to consider another exemption, another expansion. While I don't expect to change many minds, I do want the members of this chamber to better understand the facts that support 859. A recent study has shown since Georgia began expanding carry rights, the violent crime rate in Georgia has fallen by 25%. During the same time frame, however, violent crime on supposedly gun-free campuses has increased 85%. This is borne out by a rash of forcible robberies at nearby Georgia State and Georgia Tech campuses recently. Guns are already on campus. Hundreds have been confiscated on Georgia campuses. The problem is not whether guns can come on campus, but who can carry them. This bill will not put guns into the hands of most students. Only those who are more mature and are already authorized to carry in most other public spaces will be permitted to have them. Licensed firearm carriers, 1 in 10 adults, are the most law-abiding segment of our population. What will happen with the passage of this bill? If 10 years of experience with campus carry in Colorado is an indication, violent crime will fall. This was borne out by a survey that the Census Bureau conducted of adults who had been victims of crime. Of the 26 who admitted they had been the victims of an attempted rape and had guns, the testimony was the rapes did not occur. The guns that were held by these potential victims made the difference between becoming a victim or protecting themselves. And interestingly, in all 26 cases of attempted rape, none of the perpetrators were injured either. So this is a measure that should save student lives. There's a handout that should be passed around shortly that documents the study that I alluded to earlier by the Georgia Tech alum. I want to close by telling you why I think campus carry is a good thing. Consider Amanda Collins. Rape survivor Amanda Collins testified before the Senate State Affairs Committee about how a ban on campus carry had affected her life. As a 21-year-old, Ms. Collins had a Nevada defensive handgun license, but the University of Nevada at Reno did not allow licensed firearms on campus. She was raped in the parking garage of the campus police station, which was closed for the night. The crime took place just a few feet from an emergency call box. She asked the Colorado senators, "How does rendering me defenseless protect you against a violent crime?" She was confronted by one state senator who said that statistics showed that the gun would have been taken away from her. Actually, statistics show that fewer than 1% of defensive gun use results in the defender's gun being taken. Amanda answered the Colorado senator, "Respectfully, Senator, you were not there. Had I been carrying concealed, he would not have known I had my weapon, and I was there. I know without a doubt in my mind at some point I would have been able to stop my attack by using my firearm. He already had a weapon of his own, he didn't need mine." Because the rapist was not stopped, he later raped 2 more women and murdered 1. The rape occurred within feet of an emergency device, as are sometimes touted as ways to alert the police and bring them on to your protection. Wouldn't have helped her in this case. So, senators, I urge you to cool down or discount the rhetoric that's been passed around on this bill and look at the hard facts. The facts in Georgia are, since we've expanded carry rights, crime has gone down everywhere but college campuses, where it has continued to increase. I respectfully urge you to vote for HB 859, and with that, I'll yield to any questions.
Chair recognizes Senator 36 for a question.
Thank you. Does Senator yield?
Yes.
Senator, you've no doubt been in the hearings that went very late on some days on this bill. Let me ask you, to your knowledge, has any college president or anyone on the Board of Regents or the chancellor, those people that are charged with running our schools, keeping them fiscally sound, growing, training the next generation of Georgians, have any of these educational leaders who are responsible for student safety asked us to pass a campus carry bill?
They haven't asked me, but I have discussed it with campus presidents, including one in one of the counties that I represent. And what I believe has happened over the last 3 years, since the dire predictions that were made with regard to SB 60 did not come to pass, that people are looking at it in a different light. 3 years ago, I had a petition on my desk from every campus security officer of every Board of Regents institution asking that we not pass it. This year, I have not received any.
So if I heard you correctly, you said you had every security,
3 years ago,
uh-huh,
none for this bill.
but 3 years ago, every campus in the system, the security leadership asked you not to pass campus carry.
They did. And this year they have been silent. And my belief in conferring with campus officials is that the experience under SB 60 has caused them to rethink whether or not this is as bad as it's been purported to be. The idea that concealed carry, we're not opening it up to all students, only to those that are 21 and older. We're not going to open it up to student housing where your younger students on campus reside. This is something that if you're going from your car late at night to your class, that you ought to be able to carry with you to protect you from someone in the bushes. And I know that we have beautiful campuses all over Georgia, but the opportunity, there's so many, the landscaping permits so many opportunities for surprise. It's something that is inducive to criminal activity. We need some way to protect students and to allow law-abiding members of the public to carry licensed firearms.
But if you'll further yield,
Certainly.
you stated that we heard 3 years ago from the head of security on every campus
Yes.
in our university system, asking that we not go forward with campus carry.
That's correct.
We heard testimony from the chancellor, Hank Huckabee, a former member of the House, a longtime Georgia leader, who spoke for the entire system and said on the record that every security personnel leader on his campuses are against this bill. That was testimony submitted this year in person by our chancellor. Is that not right?
I remember he, as a spokesperson for the Board of Regents, spoke against the bill. That's all I remember.
And isn't it true that he stated, for the record, that all 29 institutions under his watch have the opposition of the security leadership on those campuses, on those 29 campuses?
I cannot comment on that. If he did,
Is
he
it
did.
not further true that law enforcement officials across the state have pointed out the negative downside of having a rampant campus presence of guns, and still, I might add, without the ability for them to approach and ask someone on their face to present their concealed carry permit? That's still in the law of Georgia, is it not, that policemen's hands are tied behind them when it comes to having that as a primary inquiry to someone toting a gun?
There has to be a reason for a policeman to stop somebody and ask for either on a traffic stop, their driver's license, or walking at night for their permit. I believe you're correct on that.
It's curious to me, and maybe you can shed some light on it, is why we would, as a legislative body, ignore the leadership of our campuses, both the security leadership, the academic leadership, and the head of the board of our university system. What conceivable reason defends ignoring all of their requests to please let them police their campuses and keep their students safe and keep these guns off of campus? Why would we ignore our educational leadership and try to drive this bill through and make it law?
Because we can't ignore the facts. And some of the misstatements are that this will cause campuses to become awash with guns. Only 1 in 10, or less than 1 in 10 of adults have licenses to carry concealed weapons. And the campuses, the younger segment of it, they're not qualified to carry. So just of the ones who are 21 and older, the older classmen, so to speak, those are the ones that are permitted. Faculty would be permitted. Of course, security already are. You know, there are 18 exceptions to the campus carry restrictions in Georgia now. This would be the 19th.
My final question is, could you review for us, you talked about only mature people having these carry permits and being over 21, et cetera, and isn't it true, and I'd like to ask you to review, what are the requirements for obtaining a concealed carry permit? Isn't it true that it's a background check and it's paying a minor fee and not much else? There's no training required. Isn't that true, to handle a weapon?
In Georgia,
order
there's no training.
To get a concealed carry. I'm gonna just ask you to tell us about the concealed permit. What are the requirements?
I think you've stated them accurately.
So they're very low bar, isn't it, to go and get a concealed carry permit? There's no training at all that's required for any sort of ability and knowledge to handle a weapon the way that our law enforcement people are trained, for example.
No training required at this time, but there are ample resources for people who are encouraged to train. And most folks that go out for their security and buy a firearm and get a concealed permit license will go to a shooting range, will go to a place where they can receive instruction. That's not the problem in Georgia, because that's borne out by the fact that the licensed carriers have some of the lowest rate of committing crimes of any segment of our population, almost beyond too low to measure.
Well, Senators, I take my seat. You talked about what segment of the population. Are you familiar with the figures that show almost 80% of the Georgia population opposes campus carry? Are you familiar with that? We're up here proceeding to go against the will, is it not true, of almost 80% of Georgians, 4 out of 5 Georgians?
I question that because a lot of it boils down to how the question is posed.
Thank you for yielding.
Chair recognizes Senator 41st for a question.
Will the senator yield?
Yes.
Senator, you mentioned, I believe, that women with guns thought there was a decrease in crime. They had guns at the time of the attempted rape. There was a decrease with crime or successful rapes. Is that correct?
I was quoting from a Census Bureau study.
Senator, further yield for about 4 questions. Isn't it true that since Colorado has been forced to allow campus carry, the rate of rape has increased 25% in 2012 and 36% in 2013?
I'm not familiar with that statistic.
Thank you. Isn't it further true that in Utah, where carry campus has been permitted since 2004, the rape statistics have fluctuated greatly over the past 10 years, with the last 4 years going from 6.6, 10.7, 9.3, and then 14 in 2013 per 100,000. The difference between 2013 and 2012 accounted for almost a 50% increase. So is it not true that having campus carry certainly doesn't decrease the incidence of violence against women or rape, but may have some effect where it's been increased greatly in campuses that do have carry?
Well, and this may or may not impact on that. We heard testimony that most rapes are committed by persons known to the victim, and quite a lot of them occur in student housing, and we're not trying to extend, and I don't know what the law is in Colorado, but I would not be surprised if it has a similar limitation.
Senator Further Yield.
Yes,
Isn't it true that about 45 of the states have some type of training in order to have a carry permit? And Georgia does not have any training for a
if
carry
you say so, I have no reason to question.
Senator, is it not true that when you compare statistics with other states, you're often comparing statistics with states that may have, some have very comprehensive training, some have very little, but that most of the states would have some training before they have a carry permit, where in Georgia, we are one of the most lax that have no training at all for carry permit. So there might be some differentiation in facts and figures from various states because of that.
Well, that's certainly something that would warrant further study.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 34th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator yield?
Certainly.
Senator, the young lady that you spoke of that was on campus and had gotten raped,
Amanda Collins.
how old was she at the time of the assault?
I don't know. The article did not give her age, but just a second. She may have been 21. She was 21 at the time of the rape.
Thank you, Mr. That was it.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 42nd.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Yes.
Thank you. Senator, isn't it true that we have a good number of daycares on both our technical campuses and our university campuses?
I would not be surprised. There are daycares everywhere.
And does this legislation exclude the carrying of weapons into child care facilities?
It does not have an express exclusion for that.
Do you think it's wise, Senator, to allow guns in daycares?
I think it's wise to allow licensed gun users to carry concealed weapons responsibly wherever they go.
If you'll yield for two more, are you familiar with the one example, the Ackworth 2-year-old that killed himself just a few months ago?
I'm not aware of that.
2 years old. The fact that there are over 300 children every year that die in weapons accidents.
That doesn't surprise me.
Are you familiar with the mother, the very pro-gun mother in Florida whose 4-year-old just shot her through the back?
I heard that.
Yeah. So I guess you still agree that it's might be a wise idea to have guns in daycares?
I don't think they should be lying around, no.
Thank you.
No further questions, Senator.
Thank you. I urge your favorable consideration of HB 859.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 42nd to speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues, I rise in opposition to HB 859. I was pleased to hear the senator from the 23rd in his presentation reassure us that, only students who are 21, et cetera, would be permitted to lawfully carry weapons on college campuses. So I do think that it is a striking, glaring, and upsetting omission that we have failed to exclude daycare centers in this legislation in places where weapons would not be allowed. We don't allow guns in schools from kindergarten through 12th grade. In fact, they were specifically excluded by this chamber 2 years ago in the passage of House Bill 60. This was a wise decision and, of course, a policy that's uniformly agreed to across our state. But today, we're preparing to allow them in preschools. I came here this morning to try to improve this bill, and I do have an amendment that would exclude the daycares and preschools on our college campuses as places where weapons would be able to be excluded, but unfortunately, obviously, was not able to offer that amendment. I am certain that this was an inadvertent oversight, and one that we should fix, one that we do have time to fix, and it's a shame that we are not properly debating whether or not we are going to keep them out of the hands of toddlers. Many of our colleges and universities have daycares on their campus. I've put this on all of your desks. Albany State University, the Albany State University Early Learning Center, Augusta University Child Care Center, 121 children. Georgia Tech, 121. Georgia Southern, 66. Georgia State got a email from a constituent of mine whose toddler goes to the Suttles Child Care Center at Georgia State. She's very concerned that we have failed to exclude her daughter's daycare from where guns will now be allowed on campus. University of West Georgia, University of Georgia has 2 of them. 146 kids, 101 kids in the other. Technical colleges, Albany Technical, 126 kids. Gwinnett Technical College, the Hudgens Early Education Center has capacity for 379 toddlers and preschoolers. Now, if you just look at the enrollment numbers that we were able to put together just in the last day after realizing that this was a problem in this legislation, the potential enrollment is 1,725 very small children. These daycares contain our tiniest citizens. Their brains are just forming. My children right now go to a preschool. My boys, 6 and 3, and all other preschool children should be drawing pictures of trees and playing with blocks. These are citizens who are actually defenseless. We do need to protect these citizens. They should not have to worry about who might be carrying a gun. Certainly those that care for them every day, those that are teaching them, should not have to worry about who might walk in carrying a gun. And don't make their parents worry about a terrible accident that could occur due to the presence of a weapon, much like this mom in Florida who was just shot through the back just a day or so ago by her 4-year-old, and of course, nearer and dearer to my heart, the 2-year-old in Ackworth who killed himself just a few months ago due to a gun lying around while his dad went to change clothes. Now, these are not isolated incidents. Once a week, on average, a small child finds a gun, points it at himself or herself or someone else, and pulls the trigger. And there are at least 315 minors killed in firearms accidents around the country every year. Those are real numbers, and they're a lot higher than any stats that we hear about, rapes averted. The statistic I have on that is one person from that national crime survey that the senator from the 23rd referenced. I've seen another reference to averted by weapons, but no clarification of the type of weapon, and that number was 26. The data I have from that exact same national crime victim survey is 1 averted from someone who was carrying a weapon, of rape averted, whereas we know that there are over 300 babies dead every year due to the presence of weapons. And now we will be opening them up on our college campuses, which should be safe and sacred places. So these centers absolutely need to be exempted from the areas where people can carry concealed weapons. And I think that that's probably something that we can all agree on. Another thing that I wanted to mention is that, as we all know, college kids don't make the best decisions. I don't need to be told this. Anyone who's gone to college, had a child in college, anyone, in fact, who's lived in our society knows that college kids don't have fully formed brains. High school kids, of course, have even less fully formed brains, and we do have high school kids taking college classes, and even more now through our excellent Move On When Ready program. Brain science that has been emerging in the last years tells us that the critical parts of the brain that are involved in decision making are not fully developed until age 25. That's the part of the brain that helps you inhibit impulses. Kids get angry more easily, They don't calm down as readily. They make, as we all know, and you don't need a PhD to know it, rash decisions. And guns raise the consequences for everybody. Let's let these kids learn on a campus where they can test out the adult world while still benefiting from the structure and care of a university. And as the senator from the 36 already has ably pointed out, all the folks that we have hired, that we pay our tax money to, that are charged with running these campuses, making them excellent academic institutions, and keeping our students safe, are all uniformly and totally opposed to this legislation. They do not think it makes anyone safer. They think it makes their job of letting these kids test out the real world much more difficult. I also hear from professors. They're worried about holding office hours when a student comes to see them who's mad about their grade. Can't we decide to at least let them make their offices gun-free? And what about classrooms? We want and expect professors to challenge students and engage in debate. The University of Houston is telling its professors to remove challenging topics from their lectures and curb their office hours and not go there with that student. That's the type of discussion that's happening all across faculty in Texas as they prepare to implement campus carry, and the faculty is rising up to voice their frustration and their opposition. Every day, my office is getting emails and calls from parents of students who are in college in Georgia or planning to go. They say their children will be going elsewhere to college if this law passes. University of Georgia and Georgia Tech have both benefited in national rankings because of the Hope Scholarship, the work that this body has done. It's kept some of our brightest students here in Georgia. This change in policy, and we had the first, I think, person to testify at the Senate Judiciary hearing said, my son at Georgia Tech, that's where he wanted to go, but I may be transferring him. This could push them out of state and lead to a brain drain. And it's not just of the students, of course. I mean, I can tell you my students will not attend a college where guns are allowed on campus. My boys, when they're ready for college, I will not send them to a college that allows guns, because I know it doesn't make them safer, and it says something to me about how much you value learning and the attitude that whatever that state is has towards its institutions of higher learning. And as a mom, that matters to me. And it matters to a lot of other moms too. So be careful. We will lose students from this. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. And even worse, we will lose faculty from this. You try all the time to attract talented faculty. That's how you keep yourself competitive. You know, the Hope Scholarship, as I was just mentioning, has helped us so much to do those things. Let's not undermine it. There was a piece in The Atlantic by a Georgia Tech professor. He says, Texas's law has incited a spate of distress among educators. Fritz Steiner, UT Austin's Dean of Architecture, fairly renowned, cited the law as a catalyst for seeking another position. He's leaving University of Texas. University of Virginia Media Studies professor, who is a UT Austin alumnus, withdrew his candidacy to go there as a finalist for their College of Communications due to the new gun law there. University administrators don't like this policy either. We've already been through how they oppose it, how all 29 police chiefs oppose it, presidents of every university, and of course the students do too. I also put on your desk the survey conducted by Georgia Tech Student Government Association 2 weeks ago, demonstrating that they do not at all support what we are apparently forcing upon them, and that's a shame. And these are real concerns. Everything I've been talking about are real concerns, and you know, they were the concerns of Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. In 1824, when they set out the charter for my alma mater, the University of Virginia, saying that guns would not be allowed on campus there. I'm sure many of you remember who the author of the Second Amendment is, James Madison. And he felt, and Thomas Jefferson felt, that in no way should guns be allowed on college campuses. If the founding fathers of our country who drafted the Second Amendment wanted guns banned from the campus, who are we to disagree? Colleagues, I'm here voicing what's on the minds of 80%, almost 80% of Georgians. This bill is not ready. We don't need to rush into anything. 80% of Georgians, we got nothing to fear. We got nothing to fear politically. 80% of Georgians. I encourage you to vote against this legislation. I'm happy to take questions.
Chair recognizes Senator on the 45th for a question.
Thank you. Senator, would you yield?
Absolutely.
Senator, is it not true that you and I are colleagues that have
Absolutely.
a great interest in children over these years? And mine is a very long history, and yours is just starting in this room. But
right.
is that not true that we have a great
is true.
interest in children?
It is true, Senator, and I often try to tell you how much I respect all of your work on behalf of children. Really admire everything that you have done.
Thank you, Senator, and I admire yours too. Senator, I just wanted to ask you a question since you were stating all those statistics, and I appreciate all that research that you did into it, but isn't there also a handout on our desk, and I believe it's from the 2014 Department of Education Campus Safety and Security Data Analysis? And it gives an analysis, I'm sure you read it when you were at your desk, about statistics from all the different universities. And it shows the criminal element and the increase. And I believe at the bottom it tells the total of the incidents of burglary was 3,886. Rapes on campus, which you and I both have had a big interest in, 1,078. Burglaries and arsons, aggravated assaults, neglect, rapes, robberies, murders. And you can see, if you read it, I'm not sure if you did, but I guess my question is, over time, would you not agree that the criminal element has changed? Not just in society, but it's migrated onto the campuses, and it's a reflection of what is going on. Because isn't it true just a few years ago you had never even heard of home invasions? I hadn't. But isn't it true that crime is becoming more pervasive and insistent in all of society? Is that not true?
Well, Senator, I actually don't think that is true. Let me first say that I did not get to study in detail the handout that you were talking about, but I do have several things I would say to that. Number one, crime and violent crime has significantly fallen in our country over the last decades. Number two, college campuses are significantly safer than the surrounding communities. Number three, if there is a problem with increased crime on campus, something that none of us, you and I would agree, should take lightly, I think we need to be talking to our campus security chiefs about what additional resources or different way of doing things they might need. All 29 of them are against this, so apparently the people whose job it is don't agree with the prescription that we are forcing upon them. And I would suggest, respectfully, that they might, I certainly feel that they know much more about it than I do. Okay, so let me put that, they're against it. And, lastly, the problem with the number of crimes averted, the problem with the whole thing, first of all, I would suggest that when I was in a sorority at the University of Virginia in 1996, we had training in my sorority on self-defense, and we also had mace. I'm not sure how we've gotten away from things like that, and we're racing toward firearms, which have much more deadly consequences, but fine. All right, so personally, I think that's what we should be talking about. We're not. Fine, we're talking about guns. The problem is that crimes averted are dwarfed by the number of suicides and accidents and other incidents that then blow up and are deadly, even by accident, due to the presence of a weapon. And that just dwarfs, there's no credible study that suggests that any of that any crime averted is in any way higher than all of the other consequences that are obviously not good from the presence of weapons. That's the problem. And I was telling the senator, my seatmate from the 54th, look, if you want to have a gun in your house, protect yourself in your home. I totally get it. That is awesome. But when you're bringing it out in public, there are other consequences. And I'm just gonna say it one more time. There's just no credible evidence that any diminution in crime is just dwarfed by accidents, suicides, and other deadly consequences. And that's just the reality. So that's why I can't agree with it.
Chair recognizes Senator 24th.
Lady in the well, will you yield?
Absolutely, to our retiring colleague, and we sure are gonna miss you.
I want to ask you one question mainly, but I want to just say that you had so much information and you're so passionate about what you believe, and I respect that. And
Thank you.
because I couldn't keep up with a lot of it, my comprehension level wasn't catching up with you.
I did not believe that at all, but
But I want to ask you one big question.
sure.
You said you went to the University of Virginia. I assume that you went to some college. You seem educated to me. Supposing that you were coming to your dormitory one evening from home, and you were walking down the walk path to your dormitory, and you were snatched off of that walkway by one or two or whatever it was, and you were pulled into the bushes and was raped or ravished or hurt or shot or killed, would you prefer not to have a weapon of some description to help save your life that night?
Senator, it's a fair point, and I appreciate the emotional terms you put it in. The problem with this debate, actually, is that I get it. I get why people think that they would actually be safer with a weapon. It's an emotional reaction, it's a gut reaction, and it completely makes sense. The problem is people are objectively far less safe when there are weapons involved. And under your scenario, the problem is that gun would be much more likely, as we know throughout decades of data, to be used against me. That's the problem.
Well, you didn't answer my question, I don't think. Excuse me.
No, I do not think I would be safer because it's more likely that it would be used against me. That's my answer.
So you would be willing to take a chance of giving your life rather than having a weapon?
Senator, there are many people whose lives have been lost because of the presence of weapons. And those dwarf the numbers who have been saved because of the presence of a weapon. So on balance, yes, I know I'm not safer with guns around.
Thank you very much.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 33rd for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the senator yield?
Sure.
Senator, I served in the military for 33 years, so I've seen everything, well, just about everything that goes bang, pow, zoom, zap. So I've been around guns most of my life, or weapons. I also worked in a New York City police precinct. I wasn't a police officer, but I worked there for a number of years, and so I understand weapons, is what I'm trying to say. And I also was an educator. You know, I taught for many years, and I remember people say that there's no prayer in school, but every Friday when I would give the little kids their spelling tests or reading tests, I could see them making the sign of the cross and praying. But I have a somewhat rhetorical question for you. If you were, oh, by the way, you are my sweet mate, and I appreciate your professionalism and being a mentor to me. If you were a college professor and a student had a disagreement with a grade, and they came to meet you in your office one evening with a Glock on their hip to discuss you giving them a failing grade, how would you feel at that moment?
I would feel bullied and afraid.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
No further questions.
Thank you. I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator the 40th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Seems I'm usually down here in DeKalb situations, but today I'm not. I was driving in this morning, and last thing my wife said to me is, "Don't get too beat up down there today." And I decided I wanted to raise a couple of points that I'd like people to consider. Today, I would imagine that there may be one or two Republicans that are going to vote no on this particular bill, and I'm one of them. And that's okay. My Republican friends out here, many of them feel very, very strongly about the Second Amendment, as do they on religious freedom, for example. And I respect that, okay? I respect that. I understand their feelings. I understand their passion. Because, you know, a lot of the things, it doesn't really matter what it says in this bill if you think about it, based upon the emails we get, right? It's got the word guns in it. That's all that matters to a lot of the public. You know, when I think about people like the gentleman from 37th, when his face lights up when he talks about going out and shooting birds, or the gentleman here from the 3rd when he takes his boys out west and goes shooting and goes hunting out west, okay? So when you hear the word guns, a lot of people just react. You know, we had statistics, and I have a lot of respect for the lady from the 42nd. She's very learned. Maybe that's why she went to UVA. But I don't think there's a right or wrong answer here. You know, the governor made an observation, and when the governor speaks, people listen. And I agree with him. When this bill passes, and I think it will, the sky's not going to fall in. Okay, it won't be the end of the world. And there's both sides of the very issues. But here's why I came to the well. And here's what concerns me. My wife could care less about politics by and large, but we've watched 11 presidential debates. And this sort of reminds me of the presidential debates in some way. And what concerns me as an American is this. I've watched our country over the last decade develop an attitude of fear. We've developed an attitude of fear. My kids, who are now in their 30s and 40s, used to walk to school by themselves. Kids don't do that anymore. Forget about when I walked to school. Yeah, and it wasn't through 10 miles of snow either, I might add. But that's my point. And I'm not saying people shouldn't be prudent and shouldn't think about it. But what bothers me here, and this is what I'd like you to think about, because this bill's going to pass. Let's cut to the chase. We know the bill's going to pass. What are we doing as we go forward from here, from this bill, about changing the attitude, not of fear, not of anger in this country, because that's what a lot of this is about. The example, the gentleman youth from 24th here, when the senator would be hauled over in the bushes, okay? How many of us live our lives that way? I'm not saying you shouldn't be prudent, shouldn't think, shouldn't go certain times a day, certain places. That's not what I'm saying. But let's not, in our debate, in our discussions, as we go forward here, use an attitude of fear. That's what concerns me. In this country, what I'm viewing in the presidential politics, on both sides, by the way, that's not just one side. Because we are Americans, I still believe the glass is half full. And that's the only thing I ask you to take from this debate at the end of the day, is as we go forward, okay, to go in a positive sense. I don't need to have any questions here. That's just my feelings of why I took the well. Mr. President, I yield the well.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. President and colleagues. It is always good following my friend from the 40th because sometimes I agree with him and oftentimes I do not, but I have to admit today is just one of those times that I agree with my colleague. You know, there's a lot of different reasons why I can stand before you and tell you why I object to this Senate bill and why I believe it's bad for Georgia. There's a lot of talking, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of handouts that we have on our desks that kind of explain why this is a bad bill. But for me to really understand the ABCs, or should I say the Bs of why this is a bad bill, I had to break it down a lot simpler so that I could understand it, and hopefully those out there that listen to this debate could understand it as well. This Senate bill touches a lot of people. I can't help but to think about my 3 kids, 2 of which are still in college, and the impact that this legislation would have on them. I can't help but to think about all those kids out there that's getting ready to go to college. There are so many emotions surrounding this bill. And I would gather that there's a whole lot of us that have graduated from colleges, and we know, particularly the colleges I went to, can be fortresses at times, surrounded by fences, some of them surrounded by walls, usually with one way in and one way out. And I went to a lot of urban universities, and that's what I found. And it's real easy to patrol those universities by the campus police. I don't remember a single debate that I had on campus when I represented the student body at my alma mater where someone mentioned to us, well, we need to have guns on campus. Folks, this is a solution that the majority party is out there trying to find a problem for, and it just doesn't exist. Our campuses should be safe, our campuses should be secure, our campuses should be a place of learning without any kind of inhibition of who's packing a Glock right next to you in the library or who's walking next to you around some campus wall. So I came up with this mathematical formula that I think kind of simplifies my understanding of why this really is a bad bill. And when you look at this chart that I came up with, it kind of simplifies it by saying that this bill, when you take and combine it, and some of us that are engineers, and there's a few of us that have engineering degrees, our minds tend to think analytically, by the way, and having been a double E in undergrad, mine still thinks that way as well. So this equation makes it really simple for me to understand, and hopefully to make it simple for others, particularly my colleagues from other places in the state who, like me, needs things broken down simplistically. So when you look at this map that I put together, this equation, it states that this bill is a bad bill simply because it combines so many elements on campus, so many elements that every child should experience. And some of those elements are good, by the way, and some of those elements are bad. But when you take a bad bill and you mix it with bars and booze and beer and brawls, you got a problem. Add in a little bit more bad boys, bullies, behemoths, and biceps, and we all know what we talk about when that testosterone starts flowing. It creates even more problems. But then you add another element to all of that. I'm talking about babes, boats, beauties, and some bikinis even. And you got other problems. But the guts and really the heart of it all is ballistics and munitions and Berettas and bullets, and combine that with the bureaucracy that we have in some of our college campuses, will create bad behavior on our college campuses. That's a fact, and we all know it. I would encourage my colleagues in here to stand fast to your convictions. Remember those days when you were in college, those experiences that you had. I'm talking about the good ones and even the bad ones. Even some of those days where you didn't quite get along with your roommate or someone who happened to be on a team next to you. And imagine what it would be like if they were packing. Imagine what it would be like if both of you were packing. Folks, these things on our college campuses are nothing more. Combine that with this bill is nothing more than a recipe for disaster. This is a bad bill which is going to lead to bad behavior, and I would encourage all of you to vote against it. And Mr. President, if there are no questions, then I will yield the well.
One question. Chair recognizes Senator 13th for a question.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would the senator yield?
Gladly.
Are you familiar with the word bereavement?
Bereavement, absolutely.
Bereavement.
That would be another B to add to this chart. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And if there are any other suggestions, by the way, and I had a few others that I left out, but I didn't think the Lieutenant Governor would accept them, so I wanted to keep it simple, by the way.
You're right on that assessment.
Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
No further questions. Thank you, Senator. Chair recognizes Senator from 22nd. 22nd is off the floor, it appears. Chair recognizes Senator from the 39th. You wish to go later?
Yeah, I have the
Oh, you got the minority report? Okay. Senator from the 41st, are you wanting to, I'll recognize you at this point.
Thank you, Mr. President. My colleagues have done an excellent job outlining the different issues concerning crime and other issues. I'm really coming before you because I know it's an important issue for my constituents about how they feel about guns and the importance of them. And I've had people for and against this bill, many more against. But I think it's important that all of us look at certain issues, and we look at it in a light of looking toward experts and trying to get all the facts. There's some conflicting facts, but I do think predominantly we see that when we have colleges and large groups of young people together, it's safer without guns. You can debate that fact. But when you look at it and you see the experts in the state come to a committee, experts that control the Board of Regents and are beholden each year to the appropriations that we make, so making a very, very, very daring and important statement to come before the legislative body to oppose a bill like this, and we see Hank or Henry Huckabee, the Board of Regents chairman, make a release and give it to us. We know how important it is to him and how important it is to the presidents of the university system. You know, that should weigh on you more than anything else in this process. The experts have weighed in. I'm just going to read two quotes from the testimony before the Senate Judiciary Committee, just two paragraphs of his remarks. They're simple, but they show his belief, and I think if you feel there's merit in his expertise, then it should sway you from some of these other conflicting data. He said, "For many of you, it comes as no surprise how our institutions and faculty feel about firearms on campuses. The Board of Regents, our 29 presidents, our campus police chiefs, and many parents support the current firearm law on our campuses. We feel strongly that the current law strikes the right balance between creating a safe environment on our campuses while affording those individuals who carry users a safeguard location. This position is supported by the experience of campus presidents and campus public safety departments, who are the closest to the day-to-day realities and operations of the state's public colleges and universities. To my constituents that want campus carry, I say this: I have to put some faith in the 29 university presidents, in the person that we've appointed the head of the Board of Regents, into the campus police chiefs who are on the site, and I feel that I have to listen to their concerns and vote against this bill. You know, James Madison and Jefferson may have prohibited guns on campus many years ago, but things change. But this is current, it's our experts, and we should hear the bell. We should hear the bell ring that this bill should be defeated. You know, after that, I also do contemplate the fact that we know that in Texas there's been estimates of $47 million being spent, Florida $74 million, Indiana $40 million. Even if it's just $1 million in building some lockers or additional police or training, even if it's $1 million, if you put $1 million into our rural health system, you will save more than one life. If you put $1 million more into our prenatal programs in Georgia, you will save more than one life. If you put $1 million into cancer screening programs for the poor, you will save more than one life. Ladies and gentlemen, if this costs millions or $1 million, we know we can save lives in other areas. We do not know that this bill will save lives, but we know the University of Georgia, the head of the Board of, that's an alumni from the University of Georgia speaking there, the head of the Board of Regents has come to us in a daring way, showing the importance to him, and asked us that we defeat this bill. I urge my colleagues to consider that, to reflect upon it, and vote no. Thank you.
Chair, thank you, Senator. Chair excised Senator from 29th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'll try to keep my remarks brief, but I did want to spend a moment or two talking about both the process by which this bill came to the Senate, as well as the substantive issue before us. The Senate Judiciary Committee took this issue very seriously. We conducted a hearing that lasted well into the evening, almost 3.5 hours. We heard testimony from 40 members of the public on this issue, both for and against. We had a very detailed presentation from the bill's author, full vetting of the language of the bill. We allowed amendments in committee, and there were votes on those amendments. There was substantive debate on those amendments. So this bill has been through, on our side of the process, a very thorough vetting by folks that take this issue very seriously. Now, I've heard from constituents on both sides of this issue, and I think they deserve an on-the-record response about why I am voting for this legislation. The fact of the matter is that it is a fiction, it is a fantasy for us to say that right now guns will not appear on our campuses of public colleges and universities. That may be the law, but all that means is that somebody with unlawful intent will be armed while licensed concealed carry permit holders are involuntarily disarmed. These are people who've been through background checks, criminal background checks, had their fingerprints taken. These are responsible people. And the fact of the matter is, this is responsible public policy. I can tell you, for me, the sort of final decision point was when our governor, who has expressed reservations about this policy in the past, made it perfectly and unambiguously clear that he wants this legislation sent to his desk. I know that he has had years to soberly reflect on this issue, and I agree with the conclusion that he has come to, which is that we should not disarm law-abiding citizens who have subjected themselves to a criminal background check and had their fingerprints taken. It is just that simple. In closing, Mr. President, I would just say that allowing law-abiding citizens to exercise their Second Amendment right is the right public policy for our state, and I look forward to voting for the bill. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the will.
Senator from 56, what purpose you rise?
I move the previous question.
Senators move the previous question. There is objection. There's not. Obviously it's not debatable. Let me just state for everyone to understand that if the previous question is it is in order, of course, and if it is sustained by the Senate, it does not preclude, or it still allows for the minority report to be taken up, and that would be 10 minutes. Senator from the 41st is recognized.
Inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true this is one of the most important bills we've had this session, and adequate time should be allowed for the members to discuss it?
Senator has great passion for which he speaks.
Parliamentary inquiry, Mr. President.
State your inquiry.
Do we not have other alternatives in the rule book, such as a motion that would limit or to close debate?
Dissolve the debate. I think that would be. I think that's accurate.
Would that take precedent over this motion, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair?
It would not take precedent in this matter.
Mr. President, isn't it true that to not allow the many members that have their lights to talk would be unfair to this body, and that the members who have got up to talk, such as myself, have not used all their time, have tried to be fair and deliberative in this process?
I concur with the minority leader. Let me ask the senator from the 56, you withdraw your motion, and I'll accept the motion to dissolve the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. I withdraw my motion to move the previous question and then move to dissolve the debate.
Is there objection? There still is objection? Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe we should go back to the original motion. I thought I was accommodating the minority leader. Is there objection? Without objection, all right, there's a silent objection. Without objection, we will move into dissolving the debate. If the minority leader would approach for a moment, please. So the posture by which we are now in is dissolving the debate, which means 3 speakers will remain with, So the minority leader does wish to object to that, so we will have a vote on dissolving the debate. And just so everyone understands, the posture by which we will be in if we move to dissolve the debate, there will be 3 members that will have 5 minutes. Then the minority report would be issued that would then have 10 minutes. And then there would be the closing of the debate for 10 minutes if the sponsor so desired. The minority leader has objected. All those in favor of dissolving debate will rise, stand, and be counted. Rise, stand, and be counted if you are in favor of dissolving the debate. I'd like for the minority leader to still come forward. Chair recognizes Senator from the 41st.
Move the ayes and nays, Mr. President.
All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Chair recognizes the senator from the 39th. What purpose you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true that a no vote will allow thorough debate on this issue, which will have an impact directly on whether people live or die in the state of Georgia, and we ought to be able to debate it unfettered? Resolve. Secretary has told me it's not dissolve, it's resolve. So we're resolving the debate. The motion to resolve debate. It's a new rule that we have put in. First time it's been exercised. And the motion was to resolve the debate, and the yeas are 34, the nays are 20, and the motion has passed.
Now, the chair, Minority Leader, Chair recognizes Senator from 22nd. 22nd. Speak to the bill. The senator will have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to this bill. Part of this bill states that 2 entities are excluded, being housing for students, fraternities, and athletic events. Presumably, one of the reasons to do that is because you have alcohol and outside forces. But by allowing any other building to still be eligible, what we're saying is that we're not addressing those issues. We're not addressing outside forces because many colleges actually have theaters. They actually have conference rooms that all persons throughout the community can go into. Most colleges even advertise those particular buildings for persons outside of the community to come into. And certainly, if you have a comedy show, if you have a play or whatever it may be, the use of alcohol also can be used in those particular situations. So if the backdrop to eliminating fraternities and housing and athletic events is because it has outside forces and potential of alcohol, that is not met by allowing any other building. Also, it comes from a false assumption of good and evil. Most folks, quite frankly, are not necessarily bad, evil people, but we look at it into these absolutes. We look at it into it must be the real bad guy with a gun that's going to come get everybody and the total law-abiding person that doesn't want to do anything wrong. But, Mr. President, I say that certainly persons may who have good intentions, who may be not licensed to carry, will actually carry into these particular buildings. But how about the persons who are actually licensed to carry? Is it not presumable that that person who has it in their car may then take it into the dorm room? Is it not presumable that that person who has it in their car will then take it into the fraternity house or try to take it into the athletic event? Not being a bad person or an evil person at all, making a simple mistake that can cause tragic consequences. Also, when you're dealing in the law, you have many persons who deal in what I call barbershop law. Thinks that Miranda has to be read every time a police officer stops you. Thinks that if somebody doesn't come to an arraignment, the case has to be dismissed. How long will it be before regular citizens start believing that you can just carry on campus whether you're licensed or not? If we have that kind of misconception about the law, we have to assume that those would also exist. And lastly, we also start from the false assumption that persons are able to protect themselves and others. The fact of the matter is that, as the president of the Sheriff's Association said at a prior hearing, only police officers and those in the military actually run to the sound of gunfire. The idea that persons are now, whether they're trained or not, can do that is not accurate. The fact of the matter is, if everyone in this chamber was armed to the teeth with all sorts of weapons and something happened, only about 10% of us would make any move to go outside that door, because we're not have that mentality to do that. Just because you can shoot a weapon doesn't mean that you're able to go to the sound of gunfire and engage in a combat situation. And make no mistake, if we're talking about campus fire or even being attacked, that's exactly what you have. And lastly, as a teacher who's taught adjunct at many campuses, we should listen to those teachers, because no one more than a teacher wants his students or her students to be safe. So they come from the proposition of not being anti-gun, but pro the kids, the students that sit in their chairs every day, and they want to keep them safe. And thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well.
Would you want to? Yeah, okay. Chair recognizes Senator from the 35th. 35th for a question.
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes.
Isn't it true that my office and your office and many of us have received thousands of calls, emails from students, from parents, and from administrators of schools who do not want this bill to pass and think it's forced upon them?
That is actually correct. I received over 4,000 or 5,000 emails on this topic.
That is true. And isn't it true also that that the statistics show that in the places where they've already passed this gun carry law, that say, for example, the Utah and Colorado, the college campus crimes have increased, and there's legitimate data that's been collected by the Clergy Act that proves that rapes have increased, forcible rapes and crimes with guns?
I believe that the gentle lady is correct. There are studies that show exactly that. There's a study that was just done in Texas, as a matter of fact, that came out September 2015 that correlates to that proposition.
And one last question, if you would yield, please.
Yes.
Isn't it true that they have also found at least 300 cases where people the good guys carrying the guns on campus have almost or did shoot the wrong person?
And that would be true in many situations. Not only you're correct in what you're saying, but that would be true in many situations that we hear about, whether it's police officers or friendly fire in the military, that takes place.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 2nd for a question.
Gentlemen, do you yield, sir?
Yes.
Is it not true, sir, that some 36 years I too was a resident in your district?
Yes,
your
that's
present
correct.
district? Is it also true, sir, that when I was 20 years old, a gun was placed to my head because I went to one of my classmates' dorms because she had some unruly guests, and I went in to ask them to leave.
Yes.
And, sir, when I left her apartment, 2 guys placed a gun to my head. Is that not true, sir?
Yes, that's correct.
Sir, if you could indulge me, it's not true, sir, that I felt uncomfortable in that situation.
I would think you would.
Would that be a situation I would want anyone else in this great state, any other student, any other person that's on a college campus to go through that experience of having someone place another student having a gun and place into another student's head?
That would be accurate. Yes,
Right.
sir.
And the only difference between one student and the other is that one had a gun and the other one didn't?
Yes.
Is it not true, Senator, do you still yield?
Yes.
Is it not true, sir, that we have 2 classes of citizens now if this House Bill 859 should pass, and that would be a class of students who will possess firearms and another class of students who will not possess the firearms?
Yes, you're correct.
Does that seem right in this great state, that we should have these 2 classes of students attending our college campuses?
Well, I think I would say it's not correct. It's not right, but also you probably would have persons who possess firearms, whether they actually have the permit for concealed or actually don't have that particular permit. But the problem that becomes is many of those persons who do not have any kind of permit would never walk onto a college campus but for this bill with a weapon. And that's the problem that this bill has. It opens the door. And that was the example that I was giving. So many persons may have a weapon, but never think about doing it. But see, what happens is, as it goes out and the language gets convoluted, as I mentioned, persons think that Miranda has to be read every time a police officer stops you. Eventually it will become, and it won't take long, did you realize that you can carry a gun on a college campus? That's exactly the language that will go out. Persons don't read these statutes necessarily. And when that language goes out, that is one of the ills that you have. That's one of the problems that you have. And the fact of the matter is, that person is not necessarily even an evil person. He just believes that he can now carry a gun anywhere on a college campus. And that's exactly what will happen. Do we really believe that a person who even has a license will say, okay, I can take it into the classroom, but I must check it at the dorm? Eventually, and this is why we have laws, eventually he will not check it at the dorm. He will walk into the dorm with it. Eventually, even though he can have it in his car or take it into his class, he will stop checking it in before he goes into the frat house. He will take it in there with him. That is inevitably going to happen, and that is the problem.
Time, I allowed you to go over on time, so.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Chair recognizes now Senator from the 55th. 55th, speak to the bill.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. As a mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother of 5, expecting another, I think about the safety of my kids every day. And as the mother of a deputy marshal in DeKalb County, I wonder when she leaves home every day if she's going to return back home. I tell myself that I have to do everything that I can to make sure that my kids are safe, whether they are sitting in my living room or walking down the sidewalk going to school. Today, I am still able to think about school as being one of the safest places for a child across all grade levels, from kindergarten to 12th grade. I want that safety to extend to their college careers as well. Our universities should be a place where our children's only concerns are learning and building our futures, not whether they got to pack their gun or not. However, if we allow House Bill 859 to pass today, we will be hanging a dark cloud over the head of every single one of the tens of thousands of students currently attending our public universities. Allowing guns on college campuses would introduce an element of danger which is entirely unnecessary. Our campuses are already among the safest places in the state and in the country. According to some information that I've gathered, the homicide rate in the United States is 3.8 in every 100,000 people. On college campuses, it is 0.1 for every 100,000 people, or 38 times less frequent than outside of college. Letting students carry guns around the campus would not lower that number any further. Even when it comes to the tragic mass shootings that have happened in recent years, colleges with campuses carry have proven no safer than campuses which ban guns. Last year, a student at Umpqua Community College shot and killed 9 of his classmates, and he had a gun on campus legally. Other students there that day had guns too, but their presence did not deter or stop the massacre. But maybe some of my colleagues are not aiming to reduce the rate of murder, but of other campus crimes, such as sexual assault. The logic being that if students have guns, it would allow them to defend themselves. But it does not allow them to defend themselves. Most likely, that attacker would turn that gun on them and commit this despicable crime. It is clear that guns on campuses do not and will not contribute to a reduction in crime rates. A more pressing concern should be how guns will change suicide rates on college campuses. Every year in this country, approximately 1,100 college students will commit suicide, and an additional 24,000 students will unsuccessfully attempt suicide. The most common way that students attempt suicide is through drug overdose, which is successful only 3% of the time. Suicide attempts made with guns, however, are successful 90% of the time. It goes without saying that making firearms more available to students would make it more likely that more of those 24,000 unsuccessful suicide attempts each year will be fatal. So we should be able to agree now that if campus carry has any effect on crime and violence at all, it will make college campuses more dangerous, not safer. I find it difficult to imagine why we are fighting so hard to pass this legislation. Perhaps it is to represent the will of the constituents and the very students that we're trying to keep safe. Well, I can tell you that I have listened to a lot of people in Georgia, from parents to students to teachers. There is overwhelming opposition to campus carry across the board. 78% of Georgians overall do not want campus carry. Do I need to repeat that? 78% of Georgians do not want campus carry. Moms Demand Action has submitted thousands of signatures from mothers who don't want to see their children endangered. Professors have been cautioned to avoid difficult subjects and unscheduled meetings with students out of fear of violence and intimidation. Not only would campus carry physically endanger our students, it would stifle their ability to learn. This is our last chance to stop this legislation before it does irreparable damage to Georgia's universities and reputation. We cannot allow this bill to land on the governor's desk. If keeping campuses safe is truly the prerogative of everyone in this chamber, then we will keep guns off campuses and ensure our universities are bastions of learning and free expression where fear and paranoia are not welcome. Mr. President, just before I sit down, and as our kids are getting their backpacks ready to go to school, can you imagine asking your child, if you've packed everything, have you packed your gun? Mr. President, if there are questions, I'll be glad to answer. If not, I'll yield.
No, I'm going to allow you to take some questions to accommodate a few of the senators that have not been able to speak. Chair will recognize Senator from the 34th for questioning. Try to be brief with your questioning.
Thank you, Mr. President. Would Senator yield?
I'll yield.
Senator, would you agree with me that I am married to a military policeman of 40 years?
I agree with you, Senator, that you
Senator,
are.
would you further agree with me that my only son is a post-trained police officer and has served for 10 years at Georgia Tech campuses?
That is true, Senator. I know you're very proud of him.
Senator, would you agree with me if you've seen this article I had put on every senator's desk in this chamber that Georgia Tech student leaders, we don't want guns on our campus. Did you see that?
I did see the article.
I'm hoping our colleagues saw that as well. Senator, would you agree with me as a kid? I learned a little song, and I'm not going to sing it, but it says, I like the United States of America. I like the way we all live without fear. Senator, would you agree with me that what they are saying in this article is that what we are doing is instilling fear? Because now kids on college campuses are fearing that their fellow classmates not only may be packing concealed, but even if there are attempt rapes or attempt assaults or any of those other things, the trained, post-trained officers are now having to deal with all the additional weapons on campus, and the good guys who are trained to protect won't know which way the bad guys are coming from. Would you agree with me, Senator?
In the words of the president of this Senate, the senator is very passionate about what she's saying.
Senator, last question. I've talked about my husband and I talked about my son, but I didn't tell you about my grandson, who is now 17 years old and visiting college campuses. I, as a grandmother, am very concerned about sending my grandson to colleges where everybody's packing and those who are trained to protect don't even know where the perpetrators are coming from. Would you agree with me, Senator?
I agree with you, Senator, as I am about my 5 great-grands, which are all boys.
Thank you, Senator.
And one more to come.
Let me call on the senator from the 36 for questions.
Thank you, Mr. President. Does the senator yield?
I yield.
Thank you, Senator. I'm sure your voice and your concern for your own children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren echo the sentiments of parents across this great state. It's true, and I think you gave a statistic that 78% of Georgians do not want us to pass a guns on campus bill.
Yes, I
Was
did.
that your
78% of Georgians overall do not want campus carry.
And if you will, yield further.
I yield.
It's already been established, 100% of our university and college presidents have asked that we not pass this bill.
That is
that
true.
correct?
That is
and that 100% of our campus police chiefs have asked that we not pass this bill.
That is true.
And as you've already said, 4 out of 5 Georgians oppose this bill.
That is very true.
So wouldn't fair-minded people want to ask and look for the answer of, what's the elephant in the room? Why is this bill moving forward in the face of 100% opposition by our academic leaders, 100% opposition by campus police chiefs, almost 80% opposition by Georgians? Why on earth would a bill be contemplated with that kind of opposition? Isn't that a fair question that people ought to be seeking an answer to?
That is a fair question. Senator, if you find the answer to that, I hope you let all of us know. We should not be passing this bill.
And if you'll yield, the truth and history will show that the National Rifle Association, the NRA, in collusion with the gun manufacturers, the firearms manufacturers, the firearms industry, are representing a very, very, very special interest, and that is upping the sales of weapons in this country. And every time one of these bills is passed, isn't it true, and it was true here in Georgia, the purchase of weapons soars in the wake of passing one of these bills, and that whose monetary interest is served is the firearms industry.
Absolutely.
And that's why they fund the NRA, and that's why they fund Carry Georgia. And that when we vote on this bill, we'll be deciding whether to vote with Georgians, with educational leaders, with law enforcement leaders, or to vote with a special interest that's all about making money and pushing more guns out into our society that already reels from the threat of violence every day. Isn't that the case?
That is the case, Senator. I agree with you wholeheartedly.
Thank you, ma'am.
Senator, thank you for taking these questions. Let me call upon the senator from the 44th. 44th, you wish to ask questions? No, she waves off. Thank you very, very much
Thank
for
you.
that. No, Senator, I do want to, don't leave just yet. I think the last one will be the senator from the 15th, the distinguished
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Yield.
I yield.
Senator, isn't it true that in the country there's already a sense of fear lurking everywhere, and this particular kind of legislation would add to the bust a cap mentality that seems to be going everywhere, floating around. Bust a cap, if you step on my toe, I'm ready to bust a cap. If you cut me off in traffic, no discussion, I'm ready to bust a cap. In other words, resolve everything with a gun. Isn't that true?
That is true.
And Senator, isn't it true that during the Wild Wild West, that bust a cap mentality ultimately had to be contained by people who believed in true law and order in our country?
That is true, Senator, and I believe there's a little bit more that goes with that line.
Well, isn't it also true that the bust a cap mentality ultimately fails in the context of Wild Bill Hickok once had a deputy that he fired too fast and killed his own deputy because he had that mentality. He had to survive. He's one of my heroes, but he had to survive, and he bust a cap too quick. So bust a cap should be the last thing in line for survival. Isn't that true?
That is true, Senator.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for the questions.
Okay, that will conclude the debate. That
you.
debate went on for 25 minutes and was supposed to go on for 10 minutes, which has cost the majority party their ability to have their voice heard on this. Now we will have the senator from the 39th to give the minority report for 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Mr. President, members of the Senate, I have taught on college campuses off and on since about 1982. And I will say this, that I have noticed things change on campuses. You know, I mean, and by the way, I'm a big baseball fan. And I love that film, that movie, Field of Dreams. But you know what the real field of dreams in this country is? It's college campuses. Because a student could go on a college campus and know that in 4 years when they leave, they can fulfill their dreams and become great and do great things. But I started learning while I was teaching that that field of dreams sometimes was a place where the outside world intruded on. I started seeing more and more students under more and more stress. I started seeing students who had paperwork because they were on medication or had a malady, usually an emotional malady. And they would come and say, Professor Ford, we need to work out, and I was mandated to work out opportunities for them to be given allowances for their emotional issues. And I started seeing the world intrude. There was no more just come class, take the lecture, go get a test, and I'll give you a grade. I saw students more and more under great stress. And I also saw more and more students using alcohol and drugs. And I found out that 3 million students, 3 million college-age students, use drugs or alcohol at least once a month. 3 million students. So we have a college campuses where students are under stress, more so now than ever. They are using drugs and alcohol, and we should keep in mind the latest research which shows that young people's emotional or mental maturation is really not on an adult level until they're 25. And you tell me you're going to put guns in that cocktail of stress and substance abuse and immature students? The field of dreams, I think too often will become in Georgia a field of nightmares. And one other impact is we're going to have an academic brain drain. There are professors, there are academics, with all things equal, come to the University of Georgia, come to the Board of Regents system, all things being equal, or we'll let you go to Wisconsin or in Madison or other academic settings that don't have campus carry. Guess what those academics are going to do? If everything being equal and some things being not equal, they're not going to come to Georgia, and our students will suffer. We will have a brain drain, sure enough. So the field of dreams that we believe that campuses can be will be turned into something else. one of the things that I've had to endure on this issue of guns on campus and guns generally. Oh, by the way, let me just read you what the University of Houston has distributed to their faculty members after they adopted a guns on campus bill. They sent out a training. They did a training presentation on Texas's campus carry law, and they told professors, you may want to be careful discussing sensitive topics. You may want to drop certain topics from your curriculum. You may not go there, quote unquote, go there if you sense anger and you have to endure what the senator from the 15th said was the bust a cap mentality. You may want to limit student access off hours. Isn't that interesting? One of the great things about academic situations is that you're in touch with students. You learn from students as they learn from you, but you may have to limit student access off hours. You may want to go to appointment-only office hours, and then finally you only meet that. You may want to only meet, quote unquote, that student. And we all, if we've been in the class, we know what that student means. It means that student that's real edgy, real easily provoked. You may want to only meet, quote unquote, that student in controlled circumstances. It's going to change our campuses. But one of the things that I've had to endure in debating this issue and other gun-related issues is the attitude or the belief on the gun advocate side that the Second Amendment is unlimited, and that anyone who challenges anything having to do with guns is un-American and don't know what they're talking about, because that Second Amendment overrides everything else. I was on a TV debate on a station of local position, and I just finally asked the guy I was debating from Georgia Care, I said, is there any place you don't want guns? I thought I had them. He said, yeah, jails. Otherwise, guns ought to be everywhere. And, you know, that's why I regret I didn't have a chance to offer the amendment to allow guns on the floor of the Senate. If you have the courage of your convictions, let's put them everywhere. But I've been concerned about that argument. And, you know, I'm going to get general here, and I don't know if I'm on point, but you all should read the Heller decision, the Supreme Court decision in the Heller case. The person who wrote that decision was a guy by the name of Antonin Scalia, recently deceased. And it's the most interesting. I am agreeing with Antonin Scalia. I know you're going to find that amazing. Conservative, right-leaning Antonin Scalia wrote in the Heller decision, he wrote this. He said, like most rights, the Second Amendment is not unlimited. It is not the right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever, in any manner whatsoever, and for whatever purpose. For example, concealed weapons prohibitions have been upheld under the amendment or state analogs. The court's opinion should not be taken, the court's opinion in the Heller case, should not be taken to cast doubt on long-standing prohibitions on the possession of firearms by felons and the mentally ill, or laws forbidding the carrying of firearms in sensitive places, and this is operative for today, in sensitive places such as schools and government buildings, or laws imposing conditions and qualifications on the commercial sale of arms. So for those of you in this room, and for those of you out in the hall, and for those of you who are abroad in the land that says the Second Amendment means we should be able to carry guns anywhere, everywhere, all the time, that's not true. Either you're ignorant of the law or you are lying. And that's why I think some of the people who are authoring this bill and advocating for it are not in a position to fully care about the implications of their bill, of the law. Because there's one major defect in this bill, You allow guns in classrooms, but you don't allow them in dormitories, you don't allow them in frat houses, and you don't allow them in the athletic events. So what happens with that 21 or 22-year-old who has that carry permit, has his piece in the classroom, and then he goes to his dorm? I asked the author of the bill that in Judiciary Committee. He said, well, there's some things that just are, and you work around them. So, major defect, major flaw in the bill, but we know what's going to happen. College campuses are going to start acquiring lockers, I guess in the dormitories. They're going to have to, because those students are going to go from Bio 101, and they're going to go into their dorm. And some of those 3 million students in the dormitories are going to drink that liquor, take that hit of dope, and they're going to have their gun with them and get in an argument. And God help us after that. So it's a defective bill for any number of reasons. It's defective in its presumptions. It's defective in its operations. And it is unfortunate that we're here at this time. And I'll be honest with you, I was pretty emotional when the motion for engrossment was made earlier this afternoon. I'm a little bit more reserved now, whether you can tell or not. But after all this debate, all this discussion, you know what? A motion to end the debate is an insult. The motion to resolve is an insult. You know, and I know I remember that motion to resolve in the draft, stuff that was sent around last January. In January, it was a bad idea then, it's a bad idea now. That's why I voted against it. The motion to resolve. It really is a motion to dissolve debate, dissolve one's conscience. But you know what? And I mean to say, it's an insult because this law will impact the lives, not just of adults, but the lives of young people. And you think it's too much on a Friday afternoon to debate it fully, to have as many people as possible to come down here? The motion to engross was bad enough. The motion to call the question was rank, but the motion to resolve beyond the pale.
Time has expired, Senator.
Do I have time for questions? Can I take questions?
No.
Time
Senator, I've been very gracious and very kind. No, I have.
Mr. President, I appreciate you for following the rules. I will take my seat, and I would advise you, my colleagues, and my friends to vote against this bill. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 23rd to close the debate.
Thank you, Mr. President. Well, the room looks about like it was when I started. I think our flock has scattered. But I'll be brief. As I said earlier, most of us already knew what our position was on this issue before the debate began. But I would like to make a few comments. I too have taught on college campuses. I've served on a college foundation for over 20 years. I was a triple dog at University of Georgia. I was there for many, many years. This is a good bill. Gun-free zones are of relatively recent vintage in Georgia's law. And time has proven that they don't work. Hundreds of guns are confiscated off of our public campuses. Concealed license holders are the most law-abiding segment of our population. think about it. They act responsibly because they don't want to lose their right to carry. I firmly believe that there's been too much hype on this issue, on this bill, a lot of what you might call fear-mongering. And I think there's been a lot of misunderstanding. Our college campuses aren't going to suddenly become awash with guns. Only 1 in 10 of our adult population carry guns under a permit, concealed carry permit. And this only affects the oldest college students. We're not going to see the horror stories that have been touted. This bill would just result in a modest increase in the lawful carrying of firearms. It can make campuses safer. To the senator from the 42nd point about losing the gun, not being able to use it defensively, less than 1% of guns that are used defensively are taken away from the holder. They do work. They do protect people. But simply put, the biggest point that I tried to make earlier was that in the decade or so since gun reform has taken hold in Georgia, where we have seriously respected our Second Amendment rights, crime has gone down all over the state, except on college campuses. It's my sincere hope that HB 859 will reverse that and will make our campuses safer places. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the well and urge all of my senator brothers and sisters to vote in favor of the bill.
Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection agreeing to report of committee which fail to pass the bill? Chair is none. Report of committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair is none. The main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor of the bill will vote aye. Those opposed, no. Secretary will unlock the machine. Chair recognizes Senator from the 36th. What purpose do you rise?
Parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Isn't it true if Georgians want to see this bill die, they need to call the governor and ask him not to sign this bill?
Senator has great passion for which she speaks. Senator from the 36th, are you going to vote? I'm sorry, but we're going to have a recount now. I just don't know. On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 37, the nays are 17, and this bill, MC Rex constitutes majority, is therefore adopted. Chair recognizes the majority leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate stand adjourned pursuant to House Resolution 1114 until 10 a.m. on Monday, March 14th.
Read the announcements.
Rules will be held upon adjournment in 450 Capitol. Education and Youth will be at 3 p.m. in 307 CLOB. Health and Human Services will be at 3 p.m. in 450 Capitol. Finance Subcommittee A will be at 3 p.m. in Mez 1. Finance will be at 4 p.m. in Mez 1. Mr. President, that completes the announcements.
Chair recognizes Senator from the 56th for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senators, if I could get your attention real quick. Local legislation as we approach the last final days of the session. Please make sure you check your email. If you've gotten an email that there's a piece of local legislation requiring your signature, please come down to room 110 in the state capitol and get those signed so we can officially process through the local consent calendar. Thank you. Have a great day.
Any other announcements? The majority leader has moved that we stand adjourned until 10 a.m. Monday, March the 14th, 2016. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes clearly have it. We stand adjourned.